Yeah, I came from the bottom, no crown, no throne. Had to build my empire off pain alone. They said I broke the mold instead. Now I'm living out the dreams they wrote off as dead. Bars on my window turn bars in my verse. Now the chains that help me just fuel my worth. God flipped my script, gave my story new pages. From the cell to the stage, watch me switch these stages. Every scar on my soul, just a piece of the map. Now I'm walking in grace, never looking back what they meant for. Turn to elevation, now I'm standing tall. That's transformation. From the prison to the palace, I rose from the madness. Grace in my balance, faith through the damage. They counted me out, but the king did the math. Now I'm walking in light, never going back. From the prison to the palace, yeah, to the palace. From the prisons, come on, to the palace.
All right, we're here with Andre Martin and Tim Moore, and they are here to share their story from prison to the palace. And can each of you introduce yourselves and share where you're from?
My name is Andre Martin, and I'm from Benton Harbor.
My name is Tim Moore, and I'm also from Benton Harbor.
When you hear the phrase "from prison to the palace," what does that mean to you personally?
It means personally, going from one side and going to one side as a naive young kid and coming back as a respected, intelligent man.
For me, I think of, a life-changing experience, like leaving a dark place and going into a light or a better place.
Why was it important for you to share your story with young people today?
It's important because I was once young, and one simple mistake can change your life. Don't do nothing so outlandish where it could take away your youth, your young adult, or maybe your whole adulthood.
Yeah, and I just don't want to see a lot of the young men and women alike, to repeat what I did or to go through what I went through. So I want to try to, share with them, how easy it is, as Andre just mentioned, how it is easy to get caught up in the system, and to get tripped up, and next thing you know, you're looking behind from bars and barbed wire fences.
All right, so we're gonna get into life before prison. What was life growing up for you? Your family, school environment. What was life for you?
I think I had a great childhood. Loving siblings, played a lot of sports, went to school, did everything you're supposed to do as a kid. But the old saying is, trouble is easy to get into and hard to get out of.
Yes, it is. I had a very good childhood. Teenage, went to school, graduated, went off to trade school and worked, kept a job, whether it was raking leaves, shoveling snow, helping, people work on cars, which I did, so it was okay for me,
Who or what influenced your choices as a young man?
I had a few, which I did know till later on in life, whether it was the music, TV, older uncles, because I was one of the older siblings, so I didn't have no siblings to really look up to. So it was like my uncles, and it wasn't so much the neighborhood. The neighborhood was pretty good, so it was pretty much my uncles, because I had one or two in particular that I wanted to be like.
Could you repeat it?
Who or what influenced your choices as a young man?
I would say friends and trying to be someone you're not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When you look back, what were the warning signs or red flags that you ignored?
Not listening to your parents, attending church but not being at church, and just ignoring the possibility that was already there that could have got me in trouble, but didn't get me in trouble. Somehow I escaped, and I know it the fact.
Yeah, there was a couple of incidents where I got, caught up with the law, in my mind, like, okay, they ain't prison bound. So, being cocky, being arrogant, so I was ignoring a lot of the positive sign that was coming down from my grandparents who stayed in church, and always like, boy, you need to go to church. I'm gonna come get. I'm like, no, not right, not this weekend, Grandma. So those type of signs I ignored, and my dad, in a sense, he never pushed me, to just do right. He just made sure that I was there. He was more of a friend, so I ignored that in the sense of, well, I need a father, and someone I can listen to. Cause I listened to him, but for the most part, it was all for the wrong reasons.
Did you have any positive role models or people who tried to steer you right? And how did you respond?
Well, of course I had positive role models. Mom's was one of them. But, as a kid, it went in one ear and out the other one. And as a kid, you pretty much want to do what you want to do. You put on the facade in front of mom, I'm doing good, but once you turn your back, you doing you, and doing you can land you in a place where you don't want to be.
Yeah. My grandmother was a good positive role model. She always stayed on my head. I remember another guy, used to help me out a lot. When I was up in Grand Rapids, he got me off into church, was teaching me some fundamental things on how to be as a young man, without the drink, without the smoking, without the profanity. He was basically telling me, without telling me, it don't take all that, and I ignored that, so it wasn't shortly after, that I ended up in that pit.
If you could talk to your younger self before prison, what would you say?
Wow. I will say, before prison, stop doing the things that I was doing. You know, um, wow. Stop doing the things that I was doing.
Basically, I would tell my younger self to listen more and to not only listen, but to obey, and to do what's right, at any cost, because it's always going to pay off, at the end. Because to his point, not listening, not doing, what older people was trying to tell me at the time and doing what I want to do, it never paid off. And it may look like it did, but it didn't.
All right, so let's talk about the road to prison. What were the key decisions or moments that led you to your incarceration? And you can just, tell me.
Basically, for me, just making bad choices, and I've been making them for a while, but sometimes when you make them, you think, okay, then nothing happened. And we continue to make them. It's kind of like when mom used to tell you, don't touch that pot, it's hot. And eventually, she keep telling me, but eventually I touch it and I get burned. So for me, that's pretty much was a turning point for me. I got burned, because of the choices that I made. So I remember now, even as an adult, that my choices ain't always the best choice. So I look for other people to help me, and I listen to them.
I would say bad choices and alcohol and drugs because it impaired me from my judgment and not being in a clear state of mind and just, again, making really bad choices.
Did you ever think you'd end up in prison or did it happen suddenly?
It happened suddenly. I never thought, again, from the childhood I had, that I would end up in prison because I didn't get in trouble. I got in trouble at home, but not with the law. So it's kind of a different. But once you get in trouble with the law, that's a different story. Again, trouble is easy to get into and hard to get out of.
No, I never thought that I'd end up in prison, and it happened suddenly, and you look up and because of the drugs and the alcohol. You look up now, you're behind bars, and after a while you realize this is serious, so it happened suddenly and I didn't know what to think at the time. I just wanted out, but I couldn't get out.
All right, let's talk about that dreadful day. What was going through your mind the day you were sentenced, and how long did they were you given?
I was sentenced to 60 to 90 years. I did 35 years in prison. At the time I got sentenced, you got sentenced by months. And when they're giving you months, you don't really know what that is until you get back to the bullpen adding it up. And once you add it up, now you realize this is my life. How I'm gonna get out of it, So it hit hard, but it was nothing I can do at that moment.
Yeah, for me, standing in front of that judge, like Dre just said, they give it to you in months. They told me 600 to 900 months. I couldn't fathom quick enough how many years that was. I got to like 36 years, I got to 3 months because I counted 36 months and I lost it. My mind went blank. It felt like I wanted to pass out, but I tried to hold my balance, and it was like everything was just out of whack for me as a person, especially as a young man. So when I did get back to the bullpen, I asked the lawyer that I had at the time, and he told me it was a term of 50 years, no less than 50 years and no more than 75 years. And when he said it, I said, years? Because I couldn't believe it. And he again said, yes. And, it was like I wanted to pass out. So when I did get back to my cell, I just went to sleep because I couldn't think of nothing else, and yeah, it was horrible.
All right, so let's talk about life behind the walls. What was your first day or week in prison like, and where were you shipped to?
I was too young to go to a real prison. So I ended up at a prison for guys under 21. And that was just quarantine. But once I got out of quarantine, now I was shipped out to a prison where grown men. And I was scared. I got to figure this out. So as far as going to prison, in my experience, my first week there, it was all about, is this my world now? Because the years I'm facing, is this my world? And do I got to adapt to the same way these people was adapting to survive? So.
My first week, I learned that I didn't have no more control. I didn't, and the thing about it, they didn't take it. I gave it to them because of the choice that I made. And that first week, I went to a underage facility, which is Riverside over there in Ionia, and I ran across younger guys like myself who was doing 50 years, 100 years, basketball scores is what we was doing. And, it was like everybody was like zombies. We was all like, we couldn't believe it. But then when you do like 2 weeks there, then once you go off to another prison where now the grown men, the adults is at, and that's where the fear sets in. Because when you're around people your own age, you kind of got a little settled, not a lot, just enough to get you out of there. But then once you hit that other facility, and there's a whole lot of them out there, that's where fear sets in.
How did being incarcerated change your view of life and people?
It made me value my life more. It made me value other people's life more. It made me just respect nature, respect the world. You miss the simplest things, So being incarcerated, it puts everything in perspective as far as this side of the wall and this side of the wall, which is someone's controlling your life and your freedom.
Yeah, because for me, I learned, like I said, I lost control. I gave control of my life up, and to do that, I had to learn like, okay, I got to adapt. I got to make some better decisions, but backtracking just a little bit, I had a 3-month-old son and I had a 1-year-old daughter, and I'm like, what's going to happen to them? I can't be there for them. I can't do nothing for them. So that was a big part of my fear, and that was a big part of helping me change my perspective on life now. When it comes to people, when it comes to my own life, how can I take care of somebody else's life when I can't even take care of my own? So I had to make better choices, and I had to, get things together, and I had to do it quick, because the facility that I was shipped to, yeah, it was a whole different world.
What was the toughest thing about being locked up, mentally, emotionally, or physically?
Emotionally, you're there by yourself. There's no loved ones around you. All your friends, everyone who once said they love you, it's not there. Mentally, I would say you got to get it together. You got to stay mentally strong to survive. Mm-hmm. And physically, you got to stay in the best shape as far as exercising, just doing things as a routine to just keep your body in tune, because as you grow from a kid, you're steady growing. I was steady growing, just had to nurture my body mentally, emotionally, and physically in all aspects.
Mentally, for me, I had to find something quick to stay positive. And for me, that was the Bible. I ran across a couple of guys that was all, but I couldn't trust nobody. If they tell me
Okay, so what made you choose the Bible?
Again, my grandmother was always that positive role model that I mentioned, a little while back. And so at that time, I just believed that God was saying, okay, now it's time. And I can't recall if it was a Bible in that cell that I was in, or did somebody invite me to church, but either way, it worked for me. And the one thing I knew that I needed in there was some peace, because my mind was so confused how a 20-year-old, how a kid that grew up in a nice home, went to school, had this, had that, never been in trouble like I was in at that time, to now find myself in trouble in the worst way. So I knew it was time for me to make a change. And it was the Bible that helped me make that change. Because again, I didn't have no control over nothing. And the only thing I knew was that I could just pray to God and pray to God, and I had a lot of people was talking about God, so I didn't have nothing else, so I had to give him a try. And long story short, in that, it worked for me.
Let's talk about your emotional and physical.
Physically, I knew I wasn't a scrawny 20-year-old, but I knew it was some guys in there that was big, and there was guys in there that was working out. And then hearing some of the stories, I knew it was gonna come a time where I'm gonna have to defend myself. I'm gonna have to protect myself. So I wanted to start working out. So I did find, maybe 1 or 2 guys here and there that didn't mind working out with me. So if not, I did it in my own room, push-ups at the very least. Scared to go work out because I didn't know what was out there. Again, that was a whole different world. So doing that, and I knew I had to get my body in shape. So I had to put down the cigarettes. I couldn't get to no more drinking anyway. And even though they had it there, but I had to make a choice, because it was those choices that got me there. Mentally, emotionally, I just had to stay strong. And again, I had to gear all of that to something that was positive. And I had to tell myself on a daily basis that positive thinking brings about positive results. And that worked for me.
So talking about positive thinking, did you ever feel like giving up, and what kept you going?
No, I never felt like giving up, because for some reason, something inside me was stronger. And I knew I had 2 kids out there that were still depending on me. I haven't seen them yet, but I knew at some point I was gonna see them. And I wanted to be in the best shape mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Although I didn't know all that collectively at that time, because again, I'm still 20, maybe going on 21. But as I got older and I grew in there, a lot of that came in perspective.
Yes. Unlike Brother Tim, I have no children, so I had nothing out there. And it was days where I was like, I can't do this. Each day was harder. It was getting harder and harder. No letters, no money. You feel abandoned.
No visits.
Some days it's better than another day. So, of course, there were times I did feel like giving up, but I always turned to God. You know, if it's my time, He'll let me know.
Was there a turning point while inside, a moment when you decided to change?
Yes. I think that was after I lost my grandfather, I lost my dad, my aunt. It was just so much that you're missing out, and you want it to become. You want them to always remember you as the kid that you were, but now you want them to see you as the man you become. So, and you want to do it for yourself. You know, I know I had to get in the books. If I wanted to go to college there, I had to get in the books. If I wanted to, whatever the case was, I had to educate myself. And that's what I took upon myself to do. You got to educate yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, I think I was incarcerated at this point 2 years, and I was in Ionia, and I was up top on the 5th floor, and I'm looking out these bars, and I don't see nothing, and that's when I broke down. I started crying, and I was like, God, I can't do this. I'm like, I need you, and it was like I heard a voice speak to me saying, I got you, just give me all of you. And so I think for me at that moment there was my turning point. I still had limited communication with my parents, when I go out and I can call them, but the mail was real far and in between, but a lot of times, even calling them was kind of fearful because one time I was talking to him on the phone and I was standing next to another guy who was on the phone and another guy came up and stabbed him. So I told my parents, look, I got to go. I hung up and I went to my cell. And, for that, I never got back on that yard phone. So I got on the phone inside the unit, And so all that, and seeing another guy getting beat over in, I think we was up in what they call the field house. And I was like, yeah, I got to get out of here. I can't do this. So it forced me to do a couple of things. Stay real connected to God, work out more to try to get this old body in shape in case I had to defend myself, and to stay positive,
All right, so we're going to talk about the turning point in transformation. So what helped you start that transformation?
My transformation started when I got tired of playing basketball on the yard, just walking the yard, listening to my music. They had a lot of self-help groups. I didn't have to take these classes. Again, furthering your education. Let me go learn a little bit more. So I started just attending self-help group classes and hearing other people's journeys, telling my journey. It just started making me become a better person. And inside the prison, knowing that I was going to be a better and greater person outside when I got out.
That transformation for me, and it came from a few different angles, losing loved ones, and I'm like, man, I got to get out before now this person passed, so I wanted to be on my best behavior, but I knew that wasn't enough because like I said before, even before I got incarcerated, I thought I was on my best behavior. And apparently that wasn't enough, so I had to change my way of thinking. So I took a class, and in that class it taught one thing that really still honed in on me today is to change my stinking thinking, and to help me do that, I had to connect with people who was on that same level who wanted to change their stinking thinking. So they encouraged me, they held me accountable. When they see me with my head down, these 50 years, and they see me thinking about my kids, they're like, they knew this. And so they reminded me of, even though I was doing 50 years, somebody was doing life. Whoever was doing life, this person wasn't getting out, So a lot of that kind of helped me hold my head up a little bit more, but it was my prayer. my prayer to God that did most of the work for me on the inside, because that's where your transformation starts. A lot of times we think it starts on the outside, but for me, I learned that it starts on the inside. You know, when we start allowing God to move and work within our life and listen now and stop saying, no, that ain't for me or that ain't gonna work for me, start saying, at least I got to try it, you know, and give God a try. And again, a lot of that works for me.
But you pretty much answered the next question I was going to ask, but I'll ask it to you, Andre. How did you prepare yourself mentally and spiritually for life after prison?
Mentally and spiritually. Mentally, I was just happy to get out. Let's start there. Spiritually, again, I said it before, I was attending church but wasn't at church. I wasn't taking it seriously, you know, because I was looking at God let this happen, God let this happen, God let this happen.
So you were blaming God
In some sort.
instead of blaming
Yes,
yourself.
yes.
Okay.
But then, you know, I started being around positive people, Brother Tim, Sister Lisa. You know, I just started getting more in tune with God and myself. So spiritually, I'm starting to trust God and have more faith in God.
So let's talk about life after release. What were the biggest challenges you faced after coming home?
My biggest challenge is, wow, I would say employment, because I'm ex-con, and because of my case, you know, it's hard to get a job. But someone did give me a break. I've been working there for over a year now, making good money. But that was my most challenging thing. Getting a job, finding a vehicle, finding a home, you know. In prison, everything's free. Out here, it's a different world.
For me, my biggest challenge, and even now, being out 10 years, my biggest challenge is being around a crowd of people. Because even though I was around people in there all day, it's like here, because the conversation is different, you know, and a lot of the stuff that I'm not up on, you know, technology and things of that nature. So for me, there was, you know, and I was always not a real speaker or a real outgoer like that. So to do all that and be out of society for 26 years and then, well, actually 20, I got to do 2 years on tele. You know, so now to come out and to be involved with people, you know, that was a challenge for me, because I was always thinking that they looking at me, you know, why are they watching me? You know, and it made me feel some type of way where, okay, well, I ain't got to go. I go to the store at night. You know, I go to the store early in the morning, you know, when it ain't crowded. You know, coming to church, I sit in the back. You know, people come over, and, you know, my family bring people over. I just kind of branch off and let them have the conversation. My conversation was like 1 or 2 words. Hey, how you doing? Or, yep, you know, stuff like that. And so that was a challenge for me. But
What made you feel that way?
that's a good question. I think it was my self-esteem because of what I went through and being out of society for a number of years. You know, it was like, even now when I see people, I don't recognize them. You know, and some of them, they don't recognize me. You know, and for me, that's still a challenge, because I like to know who I'm engaging with. You know, but I think it was maybe my self-esteem, because I didn't deal with a lot of people on the other side. If you wasn't like positive, you know, or trying to do what's right, standing in the law library, working out, you know, or if you didn't respect me and I didn't respect you, and you just really hanging out together, you know. So for me, I think it was just my self-esteem. You know, I was told the other day that I'm too quiet, but that's when I'm around, you know, certain people. You know, and unfortunately, even my own kids to this day, you know, when they come around, you know, we talk and we laugh, but for the most part, I let them do all, you know, take the lead, because I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to do anything wrong, because for me, making that bad decision them years ago, it got me on point now to to the point to where I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to repeat that anymore.
So how have you been able to rebuild your life and stay focused on your purpose?
Just basically you gotta have it. You gotta have it within. You have to want to do it. You know, and you got to be around positive people. You know, you can't be around the same people you knew years ago that's still doing the same thing. So it's like you want better for yourself. You know, so.
And I think that's what it is. Like for me, to stay and on that purpose, even when I was on the other side, incarcerated, I had, like I said, I had to make a decision and what would do and what would help me. So I came up with a method of 4 W's, worshiping God, working out, working, and my wife. Those are 4 things that I feel that any true man, any real man with responsibilities can do that on his own. Because you don't want to share your wife with nobody, and you don't mind working out by yourself if you got the equipment, going Planet Fitness or got the stuff at home. You got your own job, ain't nobody on that time card or that check but you. And worshiping God, you can do that in your bedroom, you can do it in your car. You don't need anybody. So I done that on those 3 W's. That's how I did those years off those 3 W's. And a lot of people, even when I went to see the parole board, they asked me what was my 4th W, and I told them my wife. God gonna send me a wife. So getting out and knowing that she was waiting for me, that helped me to not only achieve, I ain't gonna say, but find my purpose. I ain't gonna say achieve it, because I'm still on it. But to help me find my purpose, and she's helped me stay on it. Along with, coming to church, along with working out, and along with keeping the job working.
What advice would you give to a young person who thinks it could never happen to me?
I would say open your eyes, and because it can. It happened to me, and that's the best advice I can give you. Open your eyes, because it can happen.
There's a saying, I'm sure we all done heard that said, never say never, because it will happen to you. The moment you think that it won't, again, I thought everything was going okay with me. Again, being brought up in a good home, 2-parent home at that, mom and dad, having a job, having my kids, having a vehicle at the time, and yet here I am facing 50 years. Went to school, and they were like, what happened? A bad decision. So I will encourage you to, one, listen to those who are trying to steer you right. Because if they love you, they ain't gonna tell you nothing wrong. They may not get it all right. And that's what I had to learn too. Mom and dad ain't gonna always get it right. Aunties and uncles, grandma and grandpa, they ain't gonna always get it right. But because of who you are, and because they love you, they're gonna tell you the best advice that they can. But in that best advice that they're giving, I encourage you to seek it out. Don't close the door on it. Give their advice a chance. Because right now, the situation that I was on, by not listening, I didn't give none of them a chance, and I ended up paying for it.
All right, last question. What's one powerful truth or principle you live by today that helps you stay on the right path?
God. Trusting in God.
The Bible, of course, it helped me get through my pit. And so if it helped me get through that, and to get through that, I know it helped me get through anything that comes, against me today. Because there's nothing greater than God. And I can also find God in other people. I don't have to wait for the sky to break. No, I can find God, in my wife. I can find God in the brothers, the brotherhood. I can find God through the pastor. People that's positive, because if I can do what I was doing before I got incarcerated, leaning on what I was leaning on, doing what I was doing, I can turn that switch, for something better and keep trusting God. Because I believe now that He did not bring me this far to leave me. And I encourage the youth to know that God loves you. He got a plan and a purpose for your life. It may not be the way you designed it, but his plan is always better.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The camera still rolling? That's still rolling?
Yeah.
Kids, I know, I'm hoping that you took heed to what me and the brother was saying. You know, all I'm encouraging you to do is stand on your own 2 feet. You know, trust God. Don't be peer pressured. Yep. Don't be influenced. You know, wear your own crown on your head. Just grow up and be a better person for your children. Because again, and I say this to everyone, trouble is easy to get into and hard to get out of.
You know, and to piggyback off what he's saying, just own up to your responsibilities. You know, don't take it lightly, no matter how small it may look or how much you got away with. And I didn't share this, but my dad told me one day I got in a little trouble. He told me I got by, but I didn't get away.
I remember that.
You know, and I never understood what he meant by that. And shortly after, I was facing 50 years. So no matter what you get through in life, don't think you got away with it. Own up to your responsibility, clean it up, and give yourself a chance. You know, if you have kids, give them a chance. You got nieces and nephews, give them a chance. Let them see the best version of you and who you are, you know, and you can help somebody else. And I just hope it was something said here this evening that would be a blessing unto you, you know, to your family, you know, that will give you a different sense of direction, you know, because it can happen to you.
From the prison to the palace, yeah, kept my faith through the madness. Now the chains are shattered, balance restored. I was made for more, yeah, I was made for more. From the prison to the palace, yeah, kept my faith through the madness. Now the chains are shattered, balance restored. I was made for more, yeah, I was made for more. From the prison to the palace.